A Dutch national tests positive for Andes virus while already inside a quarantine facility. RIVM confirmed it. And now the WHO has put out a formal IHR retrospective on how the legal framework was supposed to hold this response together.
This is Hantavirus Watch, and today we find out whether the architecture actually works, or whether it just looks good until somebody converts inside it.
So today is basically the IHR retrospective, the RIVM confirmation, a sourced answer on the jurisdiction question, and a lab-side reckoning for U.S. clinicians. Whole response self-assessment day.
And I want to know what inside quarantine actually means if someone still converts. Because that's not hypothetical anymore. That's the Netherlands right now.
Here's World Health Organization.
When the United Kingdom notified WHO on 2 May 2026 of a cluster of severe respiratory illness cases aboard a Netherlands-flagged cruise ship in the Atlantic, passengers from 23 countries were on board. Within days, cases of Hantavirus, Andes strain, had been confirmed in the Netherlands, South Africa, and Switzerland. The ship was still at sea.
WHO published a formal IHR retrospective yesterday. Not a press release, an institutional account called Public Health in Action. And the opening facts matter. The UK notified WHO on May 2nd. Passengers from 23 countries were aboard a Netherlands-flagged ship, and Andes strain cases were confirmed in the Netherlands, South Africa, and Switzerland before the ship had even docked.
So the UK made the notification call, not the ship's flag state, not Argentina, not WHO itself. And the document is basically saying IHR is what held the multi-country response together. I want to know what held together means when Spain went strict isolation and the Netherlands went looser. Because RIVM just confirmed a Dutch national tested positive while already in quarantine.
The Dutch case is exactly the right lens for reading this document. IHR 2005 obligates countries to notify and coordinate. It does not make every country run the same isolation protocol on its own soil. So yes, the Dutch confirmation shows the monitoring window caught a case. It also gives us the clearest data point yet on what protocol divergence costs when one country's standard is looser than another's.
Right. And this week we've been asking who's legally in charge when passengers scatter to 23 different countries. The WHO IHR piece is the most sourced answer we've gotten. IHR 2005, binding on 196 countries. But binding on notification is not the same as binding on what you do after you've been notified. And the Netherlands just handed us the proof.
This one's from the Star.
A Dutch national in quarantine has tested positive for the Andes virus. The Dutch National Institute for Public Health and the Environment, RIVM, confirmed on Friday. The patient has been admitted to hospital as a precaution and is currently in isolation, RIVM said in a statement. The Municipal Health Service, GGD, is tracing the patient's contacts.
Update on the Hondius monitoring window. RIVM confirmed Friday that a Dutch national in home quarantine has tested positive for Andes virus and is now hospitalized in isolation, while WHO puts the total reported case count at 12. This is someone the surveillance system already had eyes on, so yes, that's the monitoring architecture doing what it's supposed to do.
Except this person was in home quarantine, not a federal facility, not a hospital ward, and they converted anyway. WHO also says this patient is the crew member who got off in Tenerife and was then repatriated to the Netherlands. So the looser Dutch protocol didn't just carry a theoretical risk this week, it's attached to a named, confirmed case now.
Worth being precise. RIVM says the GGD is now tracing this patient's contacts, which means a second-order contact ring is opening around someone who is already supposed to be the contained perimeter. That's why May 31st is a checkpoint, not a clearance.
And clinical lab products confirmed this week that U.S. labs are only now recalibrating for person-to-person Andes exposure. So if any of this patient's contacts showed up at a clinic during the home quarantine window, there's a real question about whether they got the right workup.
This one's from France 24.
Social media users around the world have been claiming that Hantavirus can't be spread from one human to another. However, scientists have confirmed that the strain of the virus that circulated on the MV Hondius cruise ship can indeed be transmitted that way, though it isn't very contagious.
France 24 published a fact check yesterday that names the social media claim directly. Hantavirus cannot spread human to human. And the correction is strain-specific. Andes can, sin nombre cannot, sol cannot. That distinction is the whole discipline, and now it's in a major international outlet by name.
Here's what bothers me about that timeline. France 24 is running a fact check on May 22nd, which means U.S. clinicians receiving a sick returned Hondius passenger this past week may have been working from the same wrong assumption. Clinical lab products confirmed today that American labs are only now recalibrating their hantavirus protocols for person-to-person Andes exposure. So if a contact walked into an ER under the looser home isolation guidance and said, "I was on that ship," was the clinician running the right checklist?
The misinformation pattern here is worth naming on its own. The social media claim spread fast enough that a WHO-level response publication and a France 24 fact check both landed on the same day. That's not a coincidence. The noise got loud enough to force institutional pushback. Here's Alex Arnett at Clinical Lab Products.
Unlike sin nombre virus, Andes virus can also spread through respiratory secretions from an infected person. According to Elizabeth A. Talbot, MD, Deputy State Epidemiologist for New Hampshire, while all hantaviruses can be acquired through rodent-contaminated environments, Andes has a unique additional ability to spread through an infected person's respiratory secretions.
Clinical Lab Products today is running a piece by Alex Arnett that names the U.S. lab gap directly. Elizabeth Talbot, New Hampshire's Deputy State Epidemiologist, spells out that Andes has a transmission pathway sin nombre does not. Respiratory secretions from an infected person. That distinction should have been built into diagnostic checklists before a sick returned traveler walked into a U.S. clinic.
So U.S. labs were calibrated for sin nombre, rodent contact, environmental exposure, standard checklist, and a clinician seeing a Hondius passenger with fever this week might have been running the wrong algorithm the whole time. That's not a future risk. That's a week-old problem.
It's also the sourced answer to the question we've been circling about whether U.S. diagnostic infrastructure was strain-aware. Constanza Stiba at Euroimmune puts it plainly. The Andes cases are shifting the hantavirus conversation in a meaningful way for labs. That's an institutional acknowledgement, not a speculative one.
And it lands the same week RIVM confirms a Dutch national converted inside quarantine. The monitoring architecture caught the case. Fine. But if that person had shown up at a U.S. clinic under the looser home isolation model, would the lab have known to look for person-to-person Andes instead of a rodent contact sin nombre pattern? That's the accountability question now. Okay, step back for me. When a ship full of sick passengers docks in 5 different countries, who actually has the legal authority to do something? Is this the WHO's call? Or does everyone just kind of hope the ports cooperate?
It's genuinely complicated, and the Hondius outbreak is exposing every crack in the system. The foundational document here is the International Health Regulations, the IHR, which per WHO are legally binding on 196 countries and require each signatory to maintain surveillance capacity and designate responsible authorities, especially at ports of entry. So in theory, every country where that ship docked has an IHR obligation to assess and respond. But here's the catch. Under the IHR, WHO coordinates and recommends. It cannot order a country to quarantine passengers or share data. As IE Insights put it, the framework depends entirely on political will, and right now that will is fraying. On the ship itself, maritime law puts primary responsibility with the flag state. The MV Hondius is Dutch-operated, so the Netherlands carries significant weight. But once passengers disembark in Cape Verde, Tenerife, or fly home to Singapore or the United States, jurisdiction fragments across every home country. That fragmentation is exactly what's making contact tracing so difficult here.
You mentioned the U.S. Does Washington even have a seat at the table on this, given it formally left the WHO in January?
That's the live question health experts are asking right now. NBC News reported this week that because the U.S. left the WHO after 78 years of membership, American public health officials may not get automatic access to the surveillance data and contact tracing information flowing through WHO channels. The kind of data that would normally help track down exposed passengers who flew home stateside. It's a gap to watch. If the outbreak grows, the U.S. will be navigating this mostly through bilateral agreements, rather than the multilateral pipeline the IHR was built to provide. If you like focused daily tracking of a complex story, try Musk v. Altman Daily, a court watch on Elon Musk's trial against Sam Altman, OpenAI, and Microsoft, covering testimony, exhibits, and the AGI governance fight. Find it wherever you listen to podcasts. We've put links to every story from today's briefing in the show notes, so if something stood out, you can follow it there and read further. Thanks for listening, and have a safe Saturday. That's Hantavirus Watch for today. This is a Lantern podcast.